forecast today calls for thunderstorms, so I'm gonna do this reaction really quick, and it's 37 minutes long. So let's get on with this reaction. Yep. Oh, wait, crap, I forgot the audio. And I gotta mute this real fast.
Well, we've done it. We're in Ripper Town now.
Rip City.
This is what the people wanted. We're gonna bag us a Ripper today.
They're gonna slap the cuffs on them.
This probably explains all the London
over 100
ones.
years?
London
Who better to
supernatural
solve it
ones.
than the boys?
I mean, if we don't, I'm hanging my head in shame, and I'm never going back to America.
We can't go back to the States.
And I gotta finish this baby hat.
Here we go.
Any of you seen a Ripper?
This week on Buzzfeed Unsolved, in our season premiere, we investigate Jack the Ripper, perhaps the most infamous serial killer of all time. Hundreds of suspects have been named for this case, and it has baffled investigators and ripperologists alike for over 100 years.
But it's not gonna baffle the boys.
Yeah, and we're ripperologists.
We're unbafflable.
That's not a word.
I think it's a word.
I've done so much research on this one. I'm very, very pleased with the case I'm about to present. I think I've done it.
You think this is your white whale?
I didn't solve it, but I did a good job.
Oh, you just, okay.
Let's do
well,
it.
You got me all excited.
The year is 1888. The stage, the shadowy and fog-filled streets of the East End of London. More specifically, the Whitechapel district, an area with a proclivity for violence and crime amongst the backdrop of poverty. But suddenly, a string of murders terrorized the public in a way never seen before. The culprit, a madman with no clear motive, the world's most notorious serial killer, Jack the Ripper. While most believe the Ripper claimed the lives of only 5, now referred to as the canonical 5, others believe the Ripper claimed the lives of up to 11 women.
Could
All
be.
5 of the canonical victims were prostitutes, as many women in the Whitechapel district had to turn to prostitution as a way to survive.
Yeah,
The
and
morbid
no slut
intrigue
shaming
is
them.
not a recent development. At the time of the murders, literacy was increasing amongst the general population. The murders were covered in the newspaper, and the public became morbidly fascinated by them. In the
Yeah,
end,
this is one of
the
those cases
public
that's
was
like talked
so
about like
upset
all
at
the
failed
time.
attempts to identify the killer that the police commissioner and home secretary eventually resigned.
Was this like one of the first instances of like sort of a media frenzy around something like this? Because this
Yeah.
sounds like OJ or Jean Benet.
Oh, I wonder if they had true crime shows back then.
I don't think they did, Ryan.
Like I could see them having like little sock puppets, like
Yeah.
like doing Game of Thrones.
Okay, I can see that. Little puppets, yeah.
Yeah, little puppets.
I mean,
on
they
board with that.
definitely had true
Also,
crime
touching on the police
nonfiction.
commissioner, I think this is the first time I've actually seen a police commissioner resign because he was so upset. And that makes sense to me because I've said this before, when there's a serial killer on the loose, you really are just playing cat and mouse with the killer.
Yeah.
And he's just getting outfoxed by him at every corner.
It's your whole livelihood.
That could drive you insane. I feel like that would drive me insane.
Today, we're going to cover the 5 canonical victims, and by the end, we'll have examined the most suspects we've ever presented.
Oh,
with 8
jeez, no
possible
wonder this
killers.
episode's so long.
Without further ado, let's jump into the timeline. On August 31st, 1888, at 3:40 a.m., the body of Mary Ann Nichols was found in Bucks Row in Whitechapel. The body was discovered by a man named Charles Cross, who claims he was walking along Bucks Row when he noticed a bundle toward the western end. Another man named Robert Paul approached the body with Cross. Police would eventually arrive on the scene. Mary Ann Nichols was found on her back, her throat severely slashed, and she was disemboweled. It was determined she had only been dead for about a half hour, meaning the
She
killer
was still
was
warm.
likely nearby when Cross first saw the body.
Now, how did they, at this point in time, I don't know what their forensics are like, how do they know what a half hour is? Do they just sort of, like,
I mean, he just goes over.
let's see, that's half hour blood right there.
I think
it's
she
30 minutes.
I think she might have still been a bit
We had a
warm.
bloodhound? I don't know.
That's not bloodhounds.
No.
Or took a while for
I don't know.
or blood
I know
coagulation
bloodhounds
or
use to
something like
track
that.
things, but
You don't feed them blood and they don't,
you don't feed bloodhounds bags of blood,
you
Y-
feed a
you don't.
bloodhound some blood
and
it
it goes
barks for every minute.
No.
and it goes A positive, universal donor.
Dead for 30 minutes.
Right now we're at the site of the first murder. This is Marianne Nichols. They found her at the western end of Bucks Row, which is now Durward Street. You can kind of see where it was, like, see that building right there with the white windows?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can't go over there because there's construction now.
It's a growing city.
But just below that and a little bit towards us, she was found in the gateway of one of the houses that lined this street before. Kind of similar to these gateways here. I mean, it's kind of weird to think that they didn't know this was the first of what would be, you know,
A serial killer.
the most infamous serial killer of all time.
One crazy summer.
On September 8th, 1888, the body of Annie Chapman was found at 29 Hanbury Street. Her body was discovered by a man named John Davis, an elderly resident of the 29 Hanbury Street building. Her throat was cut, and this time the violence escalated in that the murderer took her
Ooh.
womb.
So this is the approximate location of the second killing. Annie Chapman was killed at 29 Hanbury Street, but my sources have told me that street actually moved. 29 Hanbury Street is actually over there, but where it approximately happened back in the day was around like the entrance to Truman Brewery, which is like right there.
Imagine the pandemonium.
Yeah, a little bushy
Dr. George
here.
Bagster Phillips was serving as the divisional police surgeon
Oh, that's
at
where
the
my bug
time
spray went.
and proposed the idea that the killer had anatomical knowledge by the manner in which Annie Chapman's womb was removed.
That's the first clue. He's a doctor, probably.
Probably.
Or
Or
work
has basic
as a
anatomical
butcher.
Later that month, on September 27, 1888, the Central News Agency received a letter from the apparent killer. It reads, quote, "Dear boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I have laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about leather apron gave me real fits. I am down on whores and shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again.
Oh,
You will
boy.
soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle for the last job to write with, but it went thick like glue and I can't use it. Raymond
Yeah.
is fit enough, I hope. Ha ha. The next job I do, I shall clip the lady's ears off and
Oh.
send to the police officers just for jolly, wouldn't you? Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work, then give it out straight. My knife's so nice and sharp, I want to get to work right away if I get a chance. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Don't mind giving me the trade name. Wasn't good enough to post this before I got all the reading off my hands. Curse it, no luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now. Ha ha. End quote.
What if he's the work?
Yeah.
I gotta give it to him though. Jack the Ripper is a very catchy name. This guy had a knack for naming things.
He knows his brand. If this was happening today, or if social media existed during this time,
Oh, this guy would be a viner for sure.
he'd be a viner. He'd
He'd be
have
caught fast.
extensive hashtags on every post.
He'd be
Insta
caught.
good.
He'd be caught
Insta
really fast.
food.
Hashtag ripped.
This letter wasn't released to the public until October 1st, and many believe that it was fabricated by a journalist. But regardless, it made its way to the papers. Once in the eyes of the public, the name stuck, and the killer from that point on went by the now famous moniker, Jack the Ripper. 3 days later, on September 30th at 1 a.m., the body of Elizabeth Stride was found on Burner Street by a man named Louis Deemschutz. Only her throat was cut, which led police to believe that the murder was interrupted when Deemschutz approached.
Right now we're walking up on the side of the second murder, Elizabeth Stride. She was found by a man right around here. This is now, I think, a schoolyard. A lot of people actually question whether or not this was the Ripper because her throat was cut rather hastily. None of the other little tricks that he pulled, no disembowelment, none of that stuff. Almost as if like he was walked up on and he had to run.
Yeah. Just gotta murder this one quickly.
Can't do the whole fixings here.
It was determined that she was dead for 30 minutes when examined around 1:15 a.m. Shockingly, only 45 minutes after the discovery of Elizabeth Stride, another
no.
body was found
Yep.
in Mitre Square, just west of the Stride murder. A woman named Catherine Eddowes was the second victim in the same night. Her body was severely mutilated,
Yeah.
including her face. Her uterus was removed as well as her left kidney.
So only
Yeah,
45
I think he
minutes
ate it.
after the murder of Elizabeth Stride, investigators stumbled upon the body of Catherine Eddowes here.
Right here?
In this general area, there used to be a flower bed here that was kind of, in a way, served as a memorial for her, but this was just, like I said, 45 minutes after a murder had just happened, about 10 to 15 minutes away, walking distance. But what's weird is that after he killed Catherine Eddowes here, he went back towards the direction of the first murder.
This guy knows how to zag.
Either that or he just knew the police routes.
I think he's just a zagger.
So the body is back there. Right now we're walking somewhat near the path that he would have taken away, walking east away from the body. And then we're about to arrive at a site where he dropped one of the only clues he actually left investigators.
Ooh.
Yeah.
It's here that police would discover one of the few solid clues in the entire.
Okay, this weirdly reminded me of the new Blue's Clues movie coming on Paramount Plus. I mean, I'm probably gonna see it. But anyway, back to the true crime.
Case, a piece of Catherine Eddowes' apron
Ah.
found near the scene of the crime. The apron was found by Alfred Long in the doorway of an apartment block near Goulston Street, a nearby street east of the Eddowes murder site. Near this apron, a message was written in chalk that read, quote, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing," end quote, a sign of the anti-Semitism that was common in the area. However, the crucial detail of this clue is the fact that it was found east of the Eddowes murder site, in the direction of Elizabeth Stride's murder site, the murder that occurred just 45 minutes prior. This perplexing decision could mean that the killer willingly entered an area that was swarming with cops. Aside from
Wow.
demonstrating the killer's evasive abilities, this could suggest the killer lived in this East London area, as it possibly explains the motive for entering a dangerous situation. Later, a postcard is received by the police department, dated October 1st, and written by someone also claiming to be the Ripper with similar handwriting. Quote, "I was not codding dear old boss when I gave you the tip. You'll hear about Saucy Jackie's work tomorrow. Double event
Oh
this
no.
time. Number one squealed a bit, couldn't finish
Don't
straight
call
off.
yourself
Had
Saucy
not the time to
Jackie.
get ears for police. Thanks for keeping last letter back till I got to work again. Jack the Ripper." End quote.
This isn't confirmed, but there is information out there that this postcard was received by the press agency, or whoever received it, the morning after the night of the double event. The thing being there that's strange is none of the public knew about this double event because it hadn't been in papers yet. Yet this guy was able to describe what happened in detail.
Yeah, because they're not running around.
No, I mean, there's not like
Two people got murdered tonight.
There's not Twitter.
Pass it down.
And they're not playing a giant game of telephone with Dixie cups. There isn't Twitter. So it's possible and quite likely that if the timing of this is true, this is Jack the Ripper.
On the 13th of October in 1888, the police spent a week searching every house in the East End's worst slums, but found nothing. On October 16th, a man named George Lusk received a letter. Lusk was the head of the Mile End Vigilance Committee, a group comprised of local businessmen to assist the police. The letter was signed, quote, "From hell,"
Yep.
end quote, and it was delivered in a box with half a human
Ah,
kidney.
gross.
The kidney at the time was believed to be Catherine Eddowes' missing kidney. However, it was found to be a prank by a medical student.
Still
Wait,
gross.
so the from hell letter was a medical student? That's disappointing.
I suppose.
And a waste of a
'Cause
kidney.
I love from hell. Just that as a sign off.
Also-
From hell.
This kind of also demonstrates the climate surrounding this. Like,
Right.
people weren't like, this is the worst thing on earth. There are people
They're
thinking,
like, well, we can have fun with this.
wouldn't it be
Yeah.
fun?
This is like the ice bucket challenge.
Ah,
Let's everybody get
jeez.
involved in this.
Nearly a month later, on November 9th, 1888, the body of the fifth and final canonical victim, Mary Kelly, was found at 13 Miller's Court in her bed by her landlord's assistant, who was seeking rent. This murder was by far the most
Oh,
gruesome,
yeah.
as her body was disemboweled and, quote, virtually skinned
Oof.
down, end quote.
They
This
got
is
a
the
photo
last
of it?
victim. It's a little tricky because where there used to be an apartment building is now, as you can see, it's a parking lot or car park. So we can't really know where exactly it was, but we know it was near the church. We know it was near the 10 Bells pub. So we could be actually at the place of residence of Jack himself.
Here's the landlord on the state of the body. Quote, "The sight that we saw, I cannot drive away from my mind. It looked more like the work of a devil than of a man." End quote. And with that, we arrive at the end of the 5 canonical victims. But as stated before, some believe there could be up to 11 victims,
Yeah.
with Jack the Ripper's reign of terror. One should wonder if anybody caught a glimpse of this monster, and it would seem that people did. When aggregating eyewitness testimonies of those who believe they saw the Ripper, a rough outline of the killer can be visualized. It can be assumed that he was between 25 to 35 years old, roughly 5'5" to 5'7", stocky, with a fair complexion and a mustache. Allegedly, he was
I could
seen
be taller
wearing
than
a
Jack the
dark
Ripper.
overcoat and a dark hat. The Scotland Yard's Violent Crime Command Team has said that Jack the Ripper, who one could call evil incarnated, could be described in appearance as, quote, "perfectly sane, frighteningly normal, and yet capable of extraordinary cruelty," end quote. Sir Melville Macnaghten, the Scotland Yard's head of the Criminal Investigation Department in 1903, had a general suspicion of who the killer was. He knew that the Ripper had basic knowledge of anatomy, possibly a doctor, and in Macnaghten's notes, he had narrowed
Hold
his
on. My glasses are a little dusty, so I'm just gonna quickly wipe them off real fast. That's better.
list of suspects down to 3 names. That being said, due to the overwhelming amount of compelling suspects and the fact that many feel the official 3 are not the Ripper, we're going to examine 8 names, starting with
Yep.
Macnaghten's 3 official suspects. The first suspect was Montague Johnson Druitt. Druitt was a barrister who may have had an uncle and cousin who were doctors. Around the time of his death, Druitt may have been around the age of 40 and supposedly had an interest in surgery. Montague possibly lived with his cousin, who was practicing medicine close to where the Whitechapel murders occurred. It also appears that about a month before the first canonical murder, Montague's mother went insane, and Montague had written in a note that he feared he was also going insane. In his notes,
that's a concern.
Macnaghten adds, quote, "From private information, I have little doubt but that his own family suspected this man of being the Whitechapel murderer. It was alleged that he was sexually insane," end quote. After the
What the fuck does sexually insane mean?
final murder, Montague disappeared, only to be found dead within 4 weeks of the last murder. His body was found floating in the Thames River.
Well, not like
on
they
December
can interrogate
3rd,
him.
1888.
I get this sense, this is only the first suspect, but I have a hunch everyone we look at is going to have 10 things that make them sound like they are definitely Jack the Ripper, because London at the time sounds like it was full of insane psychopaths.
The second suspect was Michael Ostrog, a Russian doctor and a criminal. Ostrog had been in an asylum previously for homicidal tendencies. Macnaghten notes that Ostrog couldn't provide a strong alibi for his whereabouts during the murders. Ultimately, he was not convicted because there wasn't enough evidence linking him to the crime.
How does a homicidal tendency work? You just dabble in murdering someone?
Yeah, I don't know if that's tendencies. You either murder someone or you don't. I can't imagine there's a half measure there.
He only killed a nanny. It was a funny thing when he was 15.
The third suspect was Aaron Kosminski, a Polish and Jewish resident of Whitechapel who spent
Wasn't
some
he like
time in an asylum in
a very-
1889 after the
Wasn't this guy like one of the most likely guys to be Jack the Ripper? I mean, I'm gonna Google who is most likely Jack the Ripper after this.
last murder. Kosminski would actually reside in asylums until his death in 1919. Kosminski was known for his hatred towards women.
By the way, if they mention H.H. Holmes, I'm gonna call bullshit on that, because I watched a documentary where one of H.H. Holmes' great-grandkids try to figure out if he was Jack the Ripper. Guess what? H.H. Holmes was not Jack the Ripper. In fact, he was still in his coffin.
Particularly prostitutes. According to McNaughton, his appearance matched descriptions provided by the police of a man in Mitre Square, which, if you'll recall, was the night of the double murder where the Ripper likely zigzagged between the police. Kosminski might be a name familiar to the public due to the fact that recently his name made headlines due to his being featured in a book entitled, quote, Naming Jack the Ripper, end quote. In this book, Russell Edwards claims that a shawl purchased at an auction contains DNA evidence proving Kosminski is the killer.
Okay, I saw a thing about the shawl. Turned out I don't think that was even the shawl. That was some random lady's shawl, I think.
The shawl was bought under the impression that it reportedly was found at the murder scene on the person of Catherine Eddowes, the fourth Ripper victim. Edwards enlisted the help of molecular biologist Jari Lohelainen of Liverpool John Moores University. Edwards and Lohelainen believe the bloodstained shawl is connected to Catherine Eddowes, based off of comparison from one of Eddowes' descendants. They also claim that semen on the scarf is linked to relatives of Kosminski. With this discovery, many felt that the case was closed, including Edwards.
Which is, if it was true, that's the smoking
Yeah.
gun, right?
You got semen, you got blood.
Time to drag his name in the mud.
Oh, I like that. You got the semen, got the blood, drag his name on through that mud.
There you go.
That's not bad.
It isn't bad, but let's find out why we can't do that.
Quote, I've got the only piece of forensic evidence in the whole history of the case. I've spent 14 years working on it, and we definitely solved the mystery of who Jack the Ripper was. Only non-believers that want to perpetuate the myth will doubt. This is it now. We have unmasked him. End quote.
So he's confident.
He's very confident.
Yeah.
But he's also spent a bunch of money and time on this.
Yep,
I
he
can
did.
understand why he's confident. He thought he had it from the beginning. Then he goes to a molecular biologist. That guy analyzes it and goes, yeah, I'd be gloating like a fuckload. Can you imagine
Yeah.
that? Like, you just solved one of the greatest mysteries of all time because you got confirmation that you wanted to hear.
But, much to the chagrin of Mr. Edwards,
Oh, no.
that may
Yep.
not be the case. It turns out that the scientist may have made a critical error of nomenclature.
Oh, God.
Summed up, Dr. Lohelainen identified a mutation in DNA on both the scarf and an Eddowes' relative named Karen Miller. This mutation was believed to be named 314.1C, a mutation only found in 1 in 290,000 people, making it very likely it was a match. However, this
And-
identification was reportedly incorrect
Oh,
and
no.
was not 314.1C, but instead 315.
How do you mess up like that?
Which is a mutation shared by more than 99% of people of European descent. Basically, this DNA could be anyone if true.
So it went from being, it's that guy, to it's one of those million people.
Basically, it was
Way
like,
to fucking go.
the blood in this scarf and Edo's descendant have this very, very rare mutation. Oh, wait, I misnamed the mutation. It's actually this other one.
You
which
just hit a
90
wrong.
Exactly, he hit a wrong keystroke, and then, all of a sudden, 99% of European people have this mutation.
Furthermore, Kosminski's
That makes it like 99% of people. It could have been like the. Never mind.
DNA was linked to the scarf using mitochondrial DNA, using a subtype that is far from unique. Sir
Jesus
Alec
Christ.
Jeffries, who is regarded as the godfather of DNA fingerprinting, has said that this evidence, quote, needs to be subjected to peer review. No actual evidence has yet been provided. Further adding fuel to the fire of skeptics is the fact that Dr. Lohelainen has yet to publish this finding in a peer-reviewed scientific journal, and has refused to answer questions to news outlets, thus making it impossible to verify his and Edwards' claims, and effectively doing quite the opposite.
Oh
How
my
did
God.
Edwards react to this?
Could
Not
you
well.
imagine getting the call, like this doctor having to
It
pick up
has
the
to be
phone
not
and-
very well.
Hello?
Remember that scarf I told you was a...
Why, yes, the most famous piece of evidence in the world.
Yeah, about that. I think my pinky may have hit the 5 when I was trying to hit the 4, and it turns out it's kind of useless and proves nothing. So all that smack you've been talking in the press kind of makes you look like a big fool.
I've wasted my life.
The fourth suspect is the notion that Jack the Ripper was actually a female, a theory that Ripperologists call Jill the Ripper. This theory was allegedly a hunch of famed Inspector Aberline as well. The idea that all of the police were on the hunt for a man when they should have been searching for a woman would explain the Ripper being able to slip by without suspicion. Some have pointed out that a midwife would have sufficient anatomical knowledge,
midwife would
and blood
know.
on her clothing would have raised no eyebrows.
Those are good
Though,
points.
It should be pointed out that all eyewitness testimony points to a man.
I love
Yeah.
this theory. I think it makes sense that a woman would be able to, slide through the crowd in a way that all these stupid police, not stupid police, but all these police would be able to, not
Yeah.
pick up on it because they're looking for a man with a mustache. Far cry from a midwife covered in blood.
Feels a little too Joss Whedon-y for me.
Joss
what if
Whedon-y.
Jack the Ripper was a
How is
lady?
it Joss
Fifth
Whedon-y?
suspect is Prince Albert Victor
What does Joss Whedon-y even mean?
Christian Edward, aka the Royal Conspiracy.
You know how they say you never trust someone with 2 first names? This guy's got 4 of them.
So that either doubles that mistrust or it
Cancels
cancels it
out?
out. Yeah. 4 names, fuck with me. That's what he said.
I'm gonna double it.
I'm gonna cancel it out.
Okay.
This theory is often scoffed at, but is still
Yeah.
perpetuated due to its wild popularity.
It's an eye roll.
Prince Edward was known to frequent areas where the victims were found, an activity that led to him contracting syphilis, which some believe drove him to insanity. Some posit this also resulted in Albert having a child with a local woman, and Queen Victoria demanded that
Yeah.
everyone who knew of the child to be taken care
Whoa.
of. Some believe that the insanity spawned by syphilis drove him to commit the murders himself. Conspiracy theorists
Would we put Queen Victoria against like annihilating people over a bastard child? Probably not. She approved of putting guns on trains.
believe he was never discovered because royal aides assisted in covering his identity. However, as mentioned before, this theory is mostly regarded as ludicrous, as there is no substantial evidence to indicate its credibility.
Looking into this, it's pretty clear that the movements of a prince, let alone or anybody that the queen would hire, would be able to be tracked. But I also do think they could cover it up. I don't know. I don't think it's that strong of a theory, but it is interesting.
I feel like if you got so many things at your disposal. If you're a queen, you probably have guards. I don't know. You get away with a lot. Just grab people off the street.
The sixth suspect is famed painter Walter Sickert, a theory mainly posed by the successful crime novelist Patricia Cornwell. After making millions on her crime novels, Cornwell has devoted her time to the pursuit of Sickert as the Ripper. In 2001, Cornwell spent £2 million buying 32 of Sickert's paintings, letters, and even Sickert's writing desk. In one bizarre stunt that was described by art curator
Wasting
Richard
money
Shaw
much?
as, quote, monstrous stupidity, Cornwell went full national treasure Nicolas Cage by cutting up a painting in search of clues. Aside from stunts, Cornwell rightfully claims that Sickert was obsessed with the Ripper, which was true. Sickert
Yeah.
referenced the Ripper in some of his paintings, even titling one, quote, Jack the Ripper's bedroom.
That's a
end
bit
quote.
weird.
Cornwell claims one painting mirrors the body position of fifth Ripper victim, Mary Kelly. She claims another painting mimics the facial wounds of fourth Ripper victim, Catherine Eddowes. There are also reportedly accounts of Sickert cosplaying as Jack the Ripper.
That's
You
fucking
realize
weird.
This is before cosplay was a thing. I don't even know if Halloween was that big of a thing.
Are you kidding me? They had like Carnival, they had Venetian masks, they had a whole
You
ton of
don't
weird
find
shit
it
back then.
strange that a grown man is dressing up as Jack the Ripper for fun. No holiday.
This just feels like, when people shame furries and,
Okay, I'm a furry. I'm gonna start right here. There's a difference. There's a difference. This is nothing like shaming furries.
just let them live their life. If they want to dress up like a pony,
Okay, this is the furthest thing from a furry. A furry is just dressing up as like a furry creature because you kind of you have a sexual thing.
why?
It's not a sexual thing. Furries are not always a sexual thing. And guess what? You can't fuck in a fursuit. Also, fursuits cost thousands of dollars. So why would you fuck in a fursuit? Use your brains, people.
Why are they so muscular all the time?
I don't care about that. Dressing up as a furry animal is a far cry from dressing up as a serial killer.
But
That's
it's
Yeah.
Like it's like a horse with like pecs, right?
I think you're
Okay, you're thinking of one of the Army's mascots. I'm more of a CB girl.
getting lost in the furry culture.
It's strange.
You just said people were
I mean,
shaming
I'm
them.
not shaming it. I don't understand it.
Cornwell also shoots down the notion that Sickert's alibi was that he was in France at the onset of the murders. She cites sketches that place him in London in music halls at the time of at least 3 killings.
By the way, anybody could sketch anybody. Like, I could just, that means if I drew a sketch of you murdering somebody back in the day, I could show up to the police station and be like, here it is.
Yeah.
Here's evidence that Shane Madej, in cold blood, killed this woman dressed as a furry.
And I feel like you would do that.
And they'd be like, you're right, we've had a lot of reports that Shane Madej is in fact a
Slap
furry.
the cuffs on those hooves.
However, the biggest piece of her case is the analysis of forensic paper expert Peter Bauer. Bauer identified 3 of Sickert's letters and 2 of the Ripper's letters as coming from a handmade paper run of only 24 possible sheets. Basically, the odds of both the Ripper and Sickert both writing letters on a batch of paper that only had 24 copies in existence is relatively slim.
That's a good
And
point.
while that is undoubtedly compelling evidence, it should be reminded that all of the Jack the Ripper letters are unconfirmed.
Yeah,
I think
that's
he
also a
probably
good point.
didn't do it, but he is indeed a weirdo.
Yeah, he's a weirdo,
Yeah.
but I don't think we need to throw him in jail for it.
The 7th suspect is Joseph Barnett, who is particularly suspicious as he actually lived with Mary Kelly, the final Ripper victim. In fact, Barnett may have lived in 10 different locations in East London, making him well versed in the area and capable of navigating back streets. Barnett worked as a fish porter, and it's believed that Barnett was in love with Kelly. According to an issue of the Daily Telegraph on November 10, 1888, Barnett referred to Mary Kelly as, quote, his wife, end quote, when she was in fact only a roommate. Barnett also disagreed with Mary's life as a prostitute and strived to make money to keep her off the streets. Quote,
That's honestly
Marie
a bit
never went
noble.
on the streets when she lived with me, end quote. Some theorize that Barnett committed the first murders to scare Kelly off the streets, which for a time actually worked. But when Barnett lost his job, Kelly returned to the street to make ends meet. Their
Yeah.
financial struggles often led to fights, and Barnett also disliked Kelly's love of gin. This culminated in one final fight over Kelly bringing home 2 different prostitutes, an act that Joseph found unacceptable.
Jeez.
This fight apparently got violent. Even a window was broken. Shortly after, Barnett moved out, and only 10 days later, Mary Kelly was found dead in her apartment. After the murder, Barnett was questioned for 4 hours, but
4
eventually set
hours.
free. Having lived there, Barnett would have intimate knowledge of the household,
He
including how
would.
to unlock the door from the outside. He was also aware of Kelly's schedule and tendencies. Details from the scene suggest Kelly was killed in her sleep, not by an outsider she invited in. Her clothes were folded by the bed, quote, as though they had been taken off in the ordinary manner, end quote.
Yeah.
And she was wearing a nightgown. As a fish porter, Barnett would have crude anatomical knowledge.
They posit that he had anatomical knowledge because he was a fish porter?
As a known associate of
Fish biology is different than human biology.
Kelly's, he would be someone local prostitutes knew, allowing him to get close enough for a sneak attack. Reportedly, one newspaper of the time stated that Barnett's friends called him Jack. He also matches the physical description and the psychological profile created of Jack the Ripper by the FBI.
Yeah.
And finally, the murders allegedly stopped after Mary Kelly, the last canonical victim. After her death, Barnett would have no other reason to kill anymore now that his lover, who he was trying to keep off the streets, was now dead.
I like it.
Pretty good, right? I mean, also to me, most of them, frankly, are very circumstantial. This one, to me, while also circumstantial, seems the closest to actual evidence in that he lived with her, they fought 10 days before her death. He was not a fan of prostitution.
Right.
He tried to keep her off the streets. I could totally see him killing people to try and scare her from doing that, right?
The motive here is certainly the most compelling
For sure.
out of all
It
the
is.
suspects.
And even the access is the most compelling. We have a known. This is the only one where where I feel like there was a very clear tie between the possible killer and the victim.
The eighth and final suspect is the most popular suspect on casebook.org, a site devoted to Jack the Ripper and a place for ripperologists to work together to solve the case. The final suspect is James Maybrick. Maybrick's death coincided with the stopping of the Ripper killings, as he died 1 year after the murders. Maybrick was an upper-class cotton merchant who resided in an estate called the Battle Crease House in Liverpool. Some would consider this to be a damning detail, as many feel the Ripper was a local man who likely wasn't upper class. However, it should be pointed out that all the murders were committed on a weekend. It stands to reason that a
That's a
wealthy
good
cotton
point.
merchant would have the ability to travel on weekends, and it is also worth mentioning that he would have the benefit of not killing in his own locale. Though,
Yeah, that's
what
smart.
makes Maybrick such a popular suspect is what many consider the biggest piece of physical evidence that links him to the crimes. That piece of evidence is a diary reportedly discovered under the floorboards of Maybrick's
Yeah,
estate.
don't have a diary of
that
your
is
murders,
signed, quote,
please.
I give my name that all know of me, so history do tell, what love can do to a gentleman born. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper, end quote. Also within the diary are reportedly intimate details of the killings. Backing up the diary's authenticity are scientific tests that have confirmed the diary seems to roughly match the era of the Ripper killings. The diary was apparently discovered by a scrap metal dealer named Mike Barrett, and this is where the story begins to lose its footing. Barrett actually admitted that he fabricated the diary,
Yeah.
only to recant the statement later, chalking it up to not
Liar,
wanting the publicity
liar.
as he was going through a failing marriage. Also
Oh,
shaky is
Jesus
the definitive
Christ.
details of the discovery of the diary. Some sources have it falling into Barrett's hands via being handed down by various generations of family, while other sources have Barrett discovering it himself, or Barrett's associates discovering
I
it
can't even
and
get the
then
story
giving it to him
straight.
due to their knowledge of Barrett being an aspiring author. However, all that aside, if the diary was in fact found under the floorboards of Maybrick's estate, it is a very strong possibility that he was in fact Jack the Ripper. Following this discovery, a gold pocket watch was reported as potential Ripper evidence. The watch apparently contains the scratched initials of the 5 canonical victims, in addition to the phrase, quote, I am Jack, end quote, and also, quote, J. Maybrick, end quote. The scratches were analyzed via electron microscope by Dr. Stephen Turgoose, whose study suggests that the scratches were not done in modern times. Another doctor named Robert Wild at Bristol University's Interface Analysis Center concluded that the scratches, quote, could have been very, very old and were certainly not new, but it is difficult to be precise, end quote. The watch, which was displayed in a Liverpool jewelry shop by a college caretaker named Albert Johnson, is dated 1846 and was purchased for £225. But given the circus around the main piece of evidence and Maybrick's far location from the crimes, it's understandable to have doubts of him as the Ripper.
Yeah.
I like the other guy better.
Barnett?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I might too. From like just looking at circumstance, it seems like he'd be the most likely.
This guy seems like kind of a boring fuddy-duddy. Like a rich guy who's like, oh, I guess I'll go into town this weekend and murder
Murder.
some people.
Yeah, like he's treating it like playing 18 holes, right? Yeah, I could see that. I think
Then
there's.
back for some squash.
I do think these are the two strongest ones.
Yeah.
And if I had to put money on it, I'd probably say Barnett too.
All right.
You don't seem as convinced as I thought you would be. I thought this was really cool. A hidden diary under floorboards, a watch.
I know you don't like to hear this. This is sort of like my approach to a lot of these real old true crime ones.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
sort of the JFK
Oh no,
approach.
I know what you're going to here. And no, please don't say it.
Let it be a mystery.
Oh my.
We'll never know.
Yeah.
Sadly, this
Just
one.
never know.
You'd be a very, very bad judge.
Why?
Well, let it be a mystery.
Sadly, this
Court is
case
adjourned.
might be an
For over
interest.
100
Might
years,
still be a
the
mystery.
mystery of Jack the Ripper has continued to fascinate, confound, and infuriate the public. Perhaps one day we will have the means to solve the crime. Or perhaps this famous case will be yet another victim to time. But for now, the age-old question will continue to persist. Who was Jack the Ripper? The case remains unsolved.
Well, let's Google it. Who was most likely Jack the Ripper? Kaminsky. Probably Kaminsky. Wait a second. Is this a flawed one? Okay, this is a newer one, so probably was Kaminsky. Hopefully. See you guys in the next one.